stories only God could write, true testimonies of faith, miracles, revelations, life-changing encounters, the missionary, and the power of God in action. Get ready to be moved, to be inspired, and to renew your hope and your faith. What is the loneliest place in the world? It's not an isolated island or a quiet desert. It's the bedside of a loved one who is physically present but spiritually unreachable, lost in the silent void of a coma. When medicine has run out of time and the ventilator is the only link to life, can a single prayer bridge the gap between this world and the silent realm of the unconscious? This is the story of Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant physician in a deep coma, and Leah, the missionary who showed up to declare that her time was not over. Our central figure is Leah Hayes, a missionary in her early 60s. Leah's ministry is defined by her absolute, childlike obedience to spiritual guidance, regardless of how illogical it seems to the world. Leah is known for her quiet strength and a pair of hands that seem to carry a palpable warmth. She had a deep personal trauma that shaped her ministry. Her own daughter was miraculously saved from a near-fatal accident years ago after doctors had given up hope. This miracle solidified her conviction that human impossibility is God's specialty. Her greatest fear is allowing fear or intellectual skepticism to override the clear voice of God. She believes that a person in a coma is simply waiting for a divine command to return, and she is determined to be the voice that delivers it. She sees the sterile, hyper-advanced environment of a hospital like Seattle's Harborview Medical Center not as an obstacle, but as the perfect stage for God to demonstrate his power. Dr. Evelyn Reed, 42, was a top neurosurgeon at Harborview, a woman whose life was dedicated to understanding and repairing the human brain. 3 weeks ago, she suffered a massive, unexpected brain aneurysm while performing a complex surgery. The best minds in her own field stabilized her body, but her mind remained shut down. She was in a deep, irreversible coma, Glasgow Coma Scale 3, and her prognosis was devastating, irreversible anoxic brain injury. Her husband, Mark, a kind and weary architect, had been living at her bedside for 21 days, reading to her, holding her hand, and slowly watching his hope drain away. The medical team, led by Dr. Chen, his wife's colleague and friend, was preparing the final, painful step, discussing the withdrawal of life support, as there was zero neurological activity and no chance of recovery. The weight of the silence in Evelyn's ICU room was crushing. Mark would sometimes talk to Evelyn about their life, the trips they planned, the children they hoped to adopt, but the only sound was the rhythmic hiss-click of the ventilator, a constant mechanical reminder that she was dependent on a machine. He knew he was talking to a shell. He felt completely alone, surrounded by machines and white walls, abandoned by the very science his wife had dedicated her life to. Leah was having coffee near Pike Place Market when the clear, undeniable instruction hit her. Harborview, ICU, room 428, the doctor who fixes brains. Her name is Evelyn. Leah immediately felt the urgency and the weight of the medical hopelessness surrounding the room. She knew this was a high-stakes confrontation between science and sovereignty. She dropped everything and drove straight to the hospital. Navigating the complex security protocols of a major hospital was difficult, but Leah, dressed simply and radiating peace, finally made it to the ICU floor. She found room 428. She paused at the doorway. Mark was inside, his head bowed, reciting their wedding vows one last time before his meeting with Dr. Chen. Leah walked in quietly. Mark looked up, startled by the presence of a stranger. "Excuse me, ma'am, visiting hours are usually restricted to family now?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Leah walked to the bedside, her eyes focused entirely on Evelyn's pale, still face, covered partially by the oxygen mask. She spoke softly, her voice carrying a deep resonance. "My name is Leah. I was sent by God. I am here to tell you that this machine does not have the final say over your wife's life." Mark stiffened. "Ma'am, I appreciate your faith, but please, my wife is a doctor, she's an atheist, and she is brain dead. There is no hope left. The doctors are coming to discuss disconnecting the support." Leah placed her hand gently on Evelyn's forehead, ignoring the machines and the tubes. She didn't argue with Mark. She addressed the unseen reality. "Mark, I respect the medical diagnosis, but my God specializes in reversing the impossible. Your wife isn't brain dead. She is simply waiting for permission to return. And I have that permission now." Leah looked directly at Evelyn's still face. and began to pray, but not the timid, pleading prayer Mark expected. It was a command, spoken with powerful authority. "Spirit of life, return to this vessel now. Evelyn, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to wake up. Your assignment on earth is not finished. Wake up and weep." As soon as the last word, weep, left Leah's mouth, the room went absolutely still, save for the rhythmic hiss-click of the ventilator. Nothing happened. Mark stared at Evelyn, then at Leah, his face a mixture of despair and anger. He was about to demand that Leah leave, convinced that this woman had only brought false hope to his final, terrible moments. But just then, the large, sophisticated cardiac monitor next to Evelyn's bed let out a sharp, unexpected beep. Beep! Beep that was slightly out of rhythm. Mark didn't notice it immediately, but Leah did. She leaned closer to Evelyn's face. The eyelid, which had been perfectly still for 3 weeks, gave a single small twitch. The final, desperate confrontation with the irreversible silence had begun, but the silence was now threatening to break. The single eyelid twitch was the first movement Evelyn had made in 3 weeks. Mark, exhausted and skeptical, dismissed it as a residual reflex. "It's nothing," he sighed, looking accusingly at Leah. "It's just the nerves." But then, the beep, beep, beep rhythm on the cardiac monitor became slightly erratic, accelerating by a few beats. Dr. Chen and a nurse, alerted by the change in vitals, rushed into the room. Their faces grim. "What is going on here?" Dr. Chen demanded, her eyes immediately finding Leah. "Who is this woman, Mark? This room needs to be sterile." Mark, overwhelmed, stammered, She just prayed. "Nothing has changed." "Something has changed," the nurse interrupted, pointing at the monitor. Her heart rate increased by 15 points. "Her blood pressure is rising." "Dr. Chen, she's responding to a stimulus, but we haven't touched her." Leah stepped forward, her hand still resting gently on Evelyn's forehead. She ignored the frantic medical team and spoke again, directly into Evelyn's ear, her voice now a firm, loving demand. "Evelyn, you heard the command. The silence is broken. You are a healer, and you must return to your assignment. Wake up!" The effect was instantaneous and profound. Evelyn's entire body seemed to jolt. Her left hand, which had been limp on the bed for weeks, curled into a tight fist. Dr. Chen gasped. The brain activity monitor, which had shown a flat, devastating line, suddenly registered a wave of low-frequency, but undeniable activity. Evelyn's face, partially visible beneath the oxygen mask, began to contort. A single clear tear escaped from the corner of her right eye, running down her temple into her hair. Then a second tear followed the first. The tears were the answer to Leah's prophetic command, "Wake up and weep." The nurses and Dr. Chen were stunned into professional silence. A patient with irreversible anoxic injury, a GCS3, should not be weeping. Weeping requires complex cortical and limbic function. Mark, seeing the tear, fell to his knees beside the bed. This was not a reflex. This was an emotion. "Evelyn," he whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. Evelyn's eyes slowly fluttered open. They were cloudy at first, filled with confusion and the pain of returning to consciousness. She was still intubated and unable to speak. But her gaze locked onto Mark. The eyes of the neurosurgeon were back. As Evelyn stared at Mark, the floodgates opened. She began to weep uncontrollably, not just tears, but deep, silent sobs that shook her body. The nurses immediately tried to stabilize her, concerned by the sudden emotional outburst, but Mark understood. He realized those tears weren't just the tears of physical return. They were the tears of a revelation. He leaned close to her ear, ignoring the medical protests. "Evelyn, what is it? Why are you crying?" Evelyn, still crying, used her right hand to slowly, painstakingly trace a single word on Mark's palm. "Forgive." The word hit Mark like a physical blow. He suddenly remembered the final, bitter conversation they had before her aneurysm. A selfish argument fueled by stress and work, ending with an unspoken wall between them. Evelyn's last conscious memory was of that unresolved anger, and her first conscious action was a demand for forgiveness. Dr. Chen immediately ordered emergency scans. They wheeled Evelyn out of the room, Mark running beside the gurney. Leah, the missionary, stepped back, simply watching the medical frenzy. The scans were the absolute, irrefutable proof. Dr. Chen, standing in the radiology room with the images, her own skepticism shattered, stared at the screen. The evidence of widespread anoxic damage was still there, but in the most critical functional areas, the areas responsible for consciousness and motor response, the brain showed new, distinct, immediate activity that defied every rule of neuroscience. The line between death and life had been miraculously redrawn in the span of 3 minutes. Dr. Chen, a woman of science, had no choice but to acknowledge the supernatural. She found Mark waiting outside the scanning room, trembling. "Mark," she said, her voice shaking, "medically, I cannot explain this. Her brain has begun to repair itself instantly. The coma is broken. The swelling is receding. Your wife is coming back to us." The revelation was not just the physical healing, but the profound spiritual truth. Evelyn had spent her time in the silent void of the coma, being confronted with the one thing she refused to address in life, her need for reconciliation. As Evelyn stabilized and was slowly weaned off the ventilator, she asked Mark to find the missionary. Mark searched the halls but couldn't find Leah. He knew she had left, completing her assignment. But the real revelation came when Evelyn, now able to speak weakly, explained what she experienced in the coma. "I was in darkness, but I heard a voice, Mark. It wasn't yours. It was God. He didn't talk about my brain. He talked about my heart. He showed me how I hurt you and how I refused to forgive myself. He told me I could only return to life if I was willing to come back with a clean heart." Evelyn wept again, but this time, the tears were purely of gratitude and joy. The neurosurgeon who could fix every brain but her own heart had finally been repaired by a miracle. The grand revelation was Dr. Evelyn Reed's testimony itself. Once fully conscious and stabilized, she asked Dr. Chen to hold a conference with the medical team. She, the celebrated neurosurgeon who once scoffed at anything that couldn't be quantified, stood before her peers and declared the impossibility. "The evidence is clear," Evelyn said, her voice still weak but firm. "My prognosis was irreversible anoxic injury. The scans proved it. But a woman of faith came into my room, and she commanded me to wake up and weep. The tears you saw were the physical sign of a spiritual operation. I didn't wake up because of a drug or a procedure. I woke up because I chose forgiveness over the silence. My brain was healed by a miracle that transcends science." The impact on the staff, especially Dr. Chen, was profound. They had witnessed a reversal that defied every medical textbook they owned. The case of Dr. Evelyn Reed became a quiet, powerful legend in the halls of Harborview, a constant question mark hanging over the certainty of modern medicine. Mark's reaction was total transformation. He had been an agnostic architect, but the sight of his wife weeping and the scientific evidence of the immediate brain repair shattered his skepticism. He didn't just regain his wife. He gained a completely new perspective on life and faith. He immediately started attending the church where Leah was known to minister, seeking the source of the power that saved his family. Evelyn's emotional transformation was equally dramatic. She became intensely focused on reconciliation. She didn't just want to heal. She wanted to repair every broken relationship in her life, starting with Mark. Their marriage, once stressed and focused solely on career success, was reborn with a new foundation of gratitude and intentionality. Dr. Chen, the brilliant skeptic, later sought out Leah. She didn't become a missionary, but she became an advocate for a holistic view of medicine, recognizing that sometimes the greatest healing comes from a source outside the operating room. Evelyn eventually returned to her surgical practice, but she was fundamentally changed. She introduced a mandatory pause for peace before every complex surgery, leading her team in a silent moment of prayer, a radical change for a Seattle hospital. She often shared her testimony, using her own medical files as irrefutable proof of the supernatural. The neurosurgeon who could fix the brain now insisted on talking about the heart. The greatest recognition came from Mark. They adopted a little girl, something they had always put off. Their home, once dominated by the stress of two high-powered careers, was now filled with the joy of intentional family life. The story of Dr. Evelyn Reed, the woman in a coma, and Leah, the missionary, stands as a powerful testament in the heart of the Pacific Northwest's technological hub. When science says it's time to pull the plug, God says it's time to wake up. The final, irreversible diagnosis of a human mind can be instantly reversed by the command of a loving God. But sometimes, the deepest miracle is the one that happens in the heart before the body returns. If God could command life back into a brain that was declared dead, what impossible situation are you facing today that is waiting for the command of faith? Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next powerful story of faith and healing.